there. So say how you say your name, Ian or Ian?
My name is Ian.
And what is the difference? I mean, that may sound dumb, but what is the difference between Ian and Ian?
No, it's not dumb at all. And depending on where you go, it's pronounced so many different ways. Jan, and most of the time it's pronounced Juan or translated into John in other places. But Ian is typically from Gaelic and Irish, whereas Ian is more frequently from Scotland as not Gaelic descent. And so that's not completely always true, but generally that's a good rule of thumb. Ian, you're going to see Scottish background. Ian, generally, if it is a traditional name, then it's going to be Irish background. And my family, while originally from Normandy in France, and that's an interesting story because my ancestor was beheaded at the Tower of London.
What?
The original Devereux was beheaded at the Tower of London. And so after that, the family moved to Ireland. And in Ireland, where there's actually a castle, Devereux, or Devereux, if you want to say it in the French way, then that's when we got the Irish pronunciation to some of our names.
Oh, how crazy.
Yeah,
so
I'm
obviously,
on the thing right now.
who's that?
That's my wife.
Do you want to say hi? You want to introduce
No,
your
she's
wife?
running away. She's just getting ready for the gym.
Oh, yeah. She's like, no, not now.
Do you want to start over?
No. I wanted authentic and real. This is great.
Okay, cool. Well, you got it. You got it.
Yes. So obviously you're into genealogy with your family because you know the whole history.
It became very important to our Devereux family. There's a large clan. On my father's side, I'm actually the last of our particular lineage, and that's 100% Ukrainian from Kiev. So I'm half Ukrainian, and then the other half is Irish and French. The French, the Devereux, comes from the region Devereux, Normand, and my ancestor, Robert the Earl of Devereux, who they've made many movies about, Elizabeth and so on and so forth, was a childhood friend and rumored to be the first lover of Queen Elizabeth's. And when she came to power, there were a lot of people vying for the throne. And while they had a lot of history, he was also seen as being someone who is trying to take the throne from her through marriage, but nonetheless without pure intent, especially with his ties to France. So she had him beheaded at the Tower of London. And my family after that decided it'd be a good idea to get a little further away and headed up to Ireland.
Yeah, I would think so too. Like they just beheaded someone. We got to get out of here. We got to get.
Yeah, this isn't not a lot of future here for us right now.
Right.
Dad probably shouldn't have been doing that.
Right. That's great. Now, so obviously with the French ties as well, is that how you kind of got into wine? Is it a thing that your family's been involved with? How did that passion for wine start?
I'll just show the wine right here. There it is, Devereux, since we've got the name. The passion for wine, it really began, I was a bartender in Santa Barbara, and down there you've got two paths as a bartender. One is to party hard and get on these boats where it's just a huge party scene and everybody's in line for the bathroom and nobody's using the bathroom. And so I wasn't at a place in my life where that made a lot of sense. The other option is to go to the wineries, because the wineries and the alcohol companies are always vying for your attention down there. And so I started to go to wineries, and I was in a band and playing music, and I really fell in love with this side of alcohol that wasn't just about raging and partying, and like that I had found in college and in my younger years. And so I got really into the wine scene, and I really appreciated not just the wine down there, mostly Pinot and Sauvignon Blancs, although Chardonnay as well. But what I appreciated was the way that people interacted with wine, with appreciation, as though it was art. Not to say that people were getting buzzed and dancing and having fun, but there was a different level of appreciation and deeper conversations. I just found like there was a better level of human interaction around that. And so I got into it. I learned a little bit about it. And then after traveling and writing for Lonely Planet, I had the opportunity to write about wine. And that came because I met a girl, as so many wonderful things in life happen. I met a girl that was living in Napa, and I was up there a lot. My friend that ran a local magazine, said, "Hey man, while you're up there, would you mind writing for 7 by 7? I just took over this magazine, and we got two people writing about wine. One, everywhere he goes is so wonderful that I can't tell what's really good and what's really not. And the other person writing for us, well, I feel like I'm getting talked down to and I don't understand what's going on. Could you just take the Lonely Planet skills and make this more like a travel guide thing?" And So that's really what opened the door. I spent the next 10 years traveling the world, working with winemakers, learning about wine, getting paid essentially nothing. I mean, like $1 a word and 200 word articles, but I got to see the world and I got to learn so much, and hearing these human stories and interacting with those people. That's where my love for wine came.
So I do need to ask you this. Did they at least pay your travel costs on top
That
of
they
what you're in?
did. So that's
Okay.
the beautiful part. And the magazine doesn't have to pay the travel costs. As a matter of fact, it's usually the region. For example, in Italy, they've got a huge fund for publicity. They don't market, but what they do is they pay for writers and other people to come to these burgeoning and young wine regions and come and write about them. So I got to go to really obscure and wonderful wine regions that make, I mean, things like Ribolla Gialla, which is still almost unheard of, although some people associate it with orange wine because often it is, and learn about these families that have been there for, 10 generations making these wonderful, unique wines. And so they didn't pay me very much by the dollar, but they paid me in life experience.
What would a typical day be like? Because it sounds like basically you went on vacation and then you got, I mean, in a sense, I know obviously it's a job, but what was it like? Was it a lot of research? Were you drinking wine every day and eating? And like, what would a typical day look like? And I know every day is different, but you know, on
It did.
average.
Well, on a trip, I'll give you a day on average on a trip. So you would wake up, I would wake up early, and I'd usually go for a run through vineyards. Oftentimes you'd stay in a little hotel, sometimes you'd stay at a winery, sometimes the different people would be spread out, but generally you're with a group of 8 to 10 writers. And very early you wake up if you want to get some exercise or experience anything on your own. That's like 5 a.m, 5:30. And so I would go for a run through the vineyards, which I love doing, come back, shower up, then there's a quick breakfast, and then you're put on a bus. And on that bus, you go to 4 or 5 locations during the day where you try the wines, you hear the stories, you're walked through the wine cellar, you're walked through the winemaking process, you try the wines, have a bite to eat, jump on the bus and go again. So you have very long days where you are basically on a tour. And it's wonderful because these tours are led by the owners and the vintners and the winemakers, and you have experiences that very few people are able to have. And so it is beautiful, but man, is it grueling, because you get there at 9 and you try all the wines. And I was relatively young at that time, so I saw a lot of people spitting, and I was like, dude, if I'm gonna have to do this all day, I'm gonna catch a buzz and rock and roll through all
Uh,
of this. And
right.
so that usually lasted for like the first 2 days. But
Yeah.
then by day 3, it's just like head in hand, and you're trying to make it to the next winery. And then they're like, okay, for you, we have a special, we are to make understand, let's do 1 hour in the cellar. And you're like, dude, we're going to have to walk in your cellar and look at barrels for an hour. This is day 4 of our trip, and we've seen like
Oh.
23 barrel rooms. And a lot of us are living in the wine country and already kind of live in this space. But you want to be kind and grateful and patient. And so it is an incredible experience, but it is often grueling. And since they're paying for you to be there, you don't choose where you go and you don't get many breaks.
So do you even get naps? Like I would think
You
drinking
nap
all
on
the
the bus.
wine.
You nap
Oh,
on the
okay.
bus
Okay, that
between
makes sense.
places. So you do, and then oftentimes you get like a 2-hour break or 3-hour break at the end of the day and before you go to dinner. And the dinners go very late. Usually you're going to dinner at a winery, or you're going to dinner at a local restaurant. And sometimes the restaurants are quite far away. And so during that break, I was usually pretty heavily buzzed. And so I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time, writing out what I had done that day, because I didn't want to. A lot of people take really detailed notes. I didn't take very detailed notes. I wrote at the end of each afternoon what my experience was and tried to keep it authentic. Again, my writing was more about experience. I've never been
Right.
someone who scores wines. Well, I've judged competition, so that's not 100% true, but my writing was always very Lonely Planet style, very experiential, very human, stories of humanity, stories of family, stories of the experience that travelers will have when they engage, but much less specific percentages of oaks or blends or high scores or low scores.
So you do that, and then all of a sudden you decide, oh, I'm going to open my own winery.
Oh, well, yet again, this is an intersection of music and wine in my life. I was actually interviewing Matt Carney, who's a Nashville musician and a
Mhm.
wonderful human being. What's up, Matt? He was in Napa Valley for a wonderful event called Live in the Vineyard. I think that and Bottle Rock being my favorite music events, perhaps events as a whole in Napa Valley. And he was in town for Live in the Vineyard, and I was interviewing him for an article in Wine Enthusiast. And he asked me how long I'd been writing, and I was like, "Well,
Mhm.
dude, I've been writing for like 12 years now." I was pretty proud. And he says, "Wow, 12 years? That is a long time to just tell other people's stories." I was like, "Oh, dick."
Yeah.
Excuse me. But
No, you can say whatever.
like, what an ass bag. And so, but I actually left that interview thinking, and I went back to my office, which I shared with a dear friend named John Trouchard, and he had been on the phone a lot in our office selling grapes because his family's been farming since the 60s here in Napa Valley. And I said, "Hey, man, I saw you farming some grapes right in front of my house in St. Helena. Are you selling those?" He said, "Yeah, actually I am." I said, "Well, I want to buy those grapes and make a wine." And he said, "I have a better idea. And I'm farming like 50 vineyards right now, and I'm having to broker and sell a lot of the grapes. Let's get long-term leases on those vineyards so we can do things from vine to bottle if you can find somewhere where we can make the wines." And I have a dear friend who has got a family winery up in Coombsville. So we started making our wines at that winery. And for 12 vintage, we're coming up, we'll be bottling our 12th vintage in June. So for 12 vintages, we've now been doing things from vine to bottle using that process. And that was the beginning of Smith Devereux, was Matt Carney saying, "Dude, do you think you're ready to do something, tell your own story?" And the answer was yes.
So, if for those who don't know, how long of a process does that take until you start seeing like returns or you start seeing like success? You start seeing like, and I would imagine maybe do you do a lot of social media marketing with it? Does that help? Or is it word of mouth?
There are a lot of different pathways to quote unquote success in the wine industry. Some people come in with a ton of money and hire a super well-known winemaker, and they immediately sell out of all of their wines and they start making money. I mean, it takes a long time to be profitable that way. There are other people who have inherited wineries, other people, second, third, fourth, fifth generations. For someone like me or another person who's just getting started in the industry and isn't just going to, drop, 10, 15, $20 million to start a full winery or even more than that, honestly, it is a path of approximately 10 years to a sustainable, profitable model is what most people will tell you. And it's getting to be even harder than that, because when you think about it, assuming your vines are mature, say it's a Cabernet, and that's what they say Napa Valley is known best for. Assuming your vines are mature, which means that they're already producing grapes that are worthy of making wine, and that can take 4 to 10 years. Then you're going to harvest that Cabernet. You're going to crush that Cabernet. You're going to put it in barrels, and it's going to be in barrels for 12 to 24 months. Then you're going to put it in the bottle, and it's going to be in the bottle for 6 to 12 months. So you've got the year of waiting for the grapes. You've got the 2 years in the barrel, and then probably another year before it's really ready to release. And so you're talking 3 to 4 years before you've even released that first red wine. Meanwhile, you've got the expenses of those next 3 vintages while you wait to release that one. So the first 4 years are all costs, all very high costs, ranging from glass to corks to labels to, I mean, just getting a permit is nearly impossible now to become a winery, not to mention the cost associated with that. And every single state you might want to ship to, they have a different cost structure and taxation structure and permit requirement. So, it's a long road to profitability. And so what I've always told people is, if you're going to get into the wine industry at the level where you're going to be an owner, or perhaps even if you're going to follow your passion in music or in any other way, as opposed to following the dollar bills, find a different definition of success.
Right.
One that you can wake up in the morning and go to sleep at night and feel as though you've achieved that. So for me, when I first was defining success by catching up to these other wineries, to my really wealthy friends, to the people who are making hundreds of thousands of cases and millions of dollars, I found myself really depressed and on the road all the time. And while the money was starting to come in, I've never been so unhappy and so far from my own true north. and so far from the people I love most. And so for me, what I ended up really having to do to stay alive was to redefine success. And for me, that became, I want to be kind, honest, humble, loving, generous, and grateful. I want to be those 6 things. I want to act like somebody who is those things and embodies those things. And if I can go to sleep every night saying that I did my best to be those things, then I'm going to consider myself a success, and I will just believe that that will lead me to a successful business. And so that helped me get through to the point where I could actually start paying myself
Right.
and buy a vineyard truck and um, adjust. Really, I haven't adjusted the winemaking. I've always spent the same amount and really taken, put a lot of care and love into the vineyards. But now we're at a place where I am, I am paying myself every month, and we have some cash in the bank, and we have earned a line of credit, and we are available in 48 states, or at least we can ship to 48 states. And I've got some distributors. So that was a very long answer to it. Could have been a short question, but there's a
No, I
lot.
think that was great. I'm sorry. I have allergies so bad right now,
So
which
do I. I thought I
really,
was sick actually, but I think it's
I did
everywhere.
too. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cough in the mic, but it's crazy because when I lived in California, I never really felt them. Maybe I did it the first time, but now being in Nashville, oh my gosh, it's horrible. So I apologize.
No, don't, not at all. And, it's interesting. We're all allergic to different things. For me, my allergies were worse in Santa Barbara because so few of the things in Santa Barbara are actually native. Santa Barbara is basically desert
I love
plants.
Santa
But
Barbara.
now there's so many flowers. Everyone from all over the world have come and planted beautiful things that grow there. So no matter what your allergies might be, you'll find something to be allergic to there.
Right, right. Okay, we got to talk about the wine. All that fascinates me. I think that's fantastic. I eventually want to have a farm. So
Oh,
I'm
cool.
constantly thinking like, do I want to do organic? Do I want to do cattle, which are two totally different things. But let's talk about your band, High Noon.
Yeah.
Tell
Thank you.
me about the band.
So the band High Noon, I've been playing music since I was about 14. It was my first true love and remains my passion. So I've been in and out of bands since I was in my early teens. And in up here in Napa Valley, that wasn't really something that was happening for me. I had come from a place where I was playing bands and booking bands in Berkeley, and moved up here into the wine industry, and I didn't have anyone really to play with, and there wasn't much of a night or a music scene. But that began to grow and change. And I was at I brought my guitar to a vineyard party, and I was playing, and this guy starts singing, and he had this beautiful voice. And I came to learn that he had grown up singing with his father, who was a preacher. And so he was like a traveling one-man choir. And so we started playing, and he was going through an incredibly difficult time in his life. And we started meeting at noon at his house to play music and to write songs that would kind of get him through a tough time. And I later started to go through a tough time. And so we used that time at noon to, like gunslingers, to just write songs and get our emotions out. And we really started to write things that we loved. And someone heard us playing, a friend of ours, and he's like, "Hey, I'm actually playing a gig at a little sandwich shop that at nighttime had live music. When it closed down, it became a music venue." And he said, "Do you want to open up for me?" And we were like, "Sure." And he said, "Well, what's the name of your band?" And we don't really we're not a band, we're just a couple guys. So, "Well, I got to put something on the flyer, dude." I'm like, "Oh, well, we meet every day at noon. It feels like gunslinging, so call us High Noon." And so we did, and we became High Noon. And as we grew, added Brandon. So the singer is Ryan Neargard. That's what I was just talking about. And we started about 8 years ago. And then we added Brandon Cherry, the drummer. He was our third drummer, but the first one that really stuck, and who is really contributing in the way that we hoped one would. And then Nick Blankenship, the bassist. We became the band High Noon, instead of just High Noon, to differentiate and to grow. And now we're playing gigs all over, which is so cool. We're playing Bottle Rock we're playing Auction Napa Valley, which is the largest Napa Valley consumer event of the year. We're going to be headlining the Healdsburg Wine and Food Festival, which is 2,000 people. And we've just got really wonderful gigs coming up. And I actually just came from the local radio station playing some live music. They're featuring our new album Swell right now on radio stations. And so what has always been my true love is now becoming something that I get to share with people at a more grand level. And it's a cool thing, man.
So they have Bottle Rock has like I don't know if it's a correspondence reporter or something, and they're doing this all over TikTok, and she's going up to people and asking them questions to see if they're an expert. And the questions
Oh,
are, who's headlining? And so it's funny because you'll see they're like, okay, well, the Chili Peppers are because they always do. And then
right.
they say, each of them gives guests and stuff like that. And some of them are like, oh, I didn't get my tickets. And so it's really interesting just to follow along, getting ready for this on TikTok, you know. But now, how would you classify like what style of genre is your music?
It's funny. I always kind of considered us just a rock and roll band, and people ask me who my influences were, and I'd say, Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin and others as well. But that's really kind of what I said, and I would say Red Hot Chili Peppers as well. And our producer recently, I heard me saying that. He's like, "Hey, dude, come here." And he's like, I want you to listen to your songs really quickly. We're just going to go through them. So we did, went through some of the songs. And he said, okay, so let's put aside what you just said. Now I want to play some other music for you. And he played Stone Temple Pilots, and he played the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and he played the Foo Fighters, and he played all of these 90s rock bands. He said, you're a 90s rock band, dude. I was like, you can tell people all you want that your influences are Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin. But I think that at the end of the day, it's Stone Temple Pilots, it's Alice in Chains, it's the Goo Goo Dolls, it's the Counting Crows. And so our style, I've been informed, and I think correctly so, is very reminiscent of the 90s rock that came from the early 90s, a little bit after the grunge era, as we sort of led into the more alternative rock and 90s rock that we still see today, like Smashing Pumpkins is headlining and Red Hot Chili Peppers are
Yes.
headlining. And so these 90s bands that have reemerged were very much like that. And it makes sense because I typically start most of the songs. We all collaborate together, but I usually begin with the music and the melody and bring them to the band, and then the song grows together. And the most influential period of my life, my teenage years, occurred in the 90s. And that's when music for me became just the soundtrack of my life. It was just that emotional angst that comes with being a teenager and loving, just falling in love with girls and no and unrequited love and unrequited, however you say that, just all of those things, and having the Counting Crows and Stone Temple Pilots, all those songs to lean on and to grow with. So I would say we're a 90s rock band living here in 2023.
It's interesting though, because a lot of, and I know this is true in country, a lot of sounds or anything that has familiarity is doing very well. A lot of that they saw, especially during the pandemic, a lot of classic hits station, and classic hits, by the way, now play Pearl Jam,
I know.
classic rock. Yes, plays Nirvana, Foo Fighters, so early Foo Fighters. But so you'll notice when they started doing research studies, because everyone was going through the pandemic, they wanted something familiar, and a lot of those stations did really well. And then now you're seeing the 90s. I mean, you're seeing it everywhere, obviously with fashion, but you're also seeing it coming back through music, whether it be country or rock. That inspiration is being
Mhm.
played out, and those are songs that actually are testing pretty well. So maybe you're onto something.
Yeah, and I think, well, I think it's actually when I look at music, like I see a lot of really fun stuff that came out of the 80s and the hair bands, and I really appreciate a lot of the hip hop and R&B actually that came out of kind of the 2000s, frankly. But when you look at 90s, just the diversity, and the intensity of the music from Pearl Jam and from what these bands are doing, like I keep saying, Stone Temple Pilots and Red Hot Chili Peppers, there's such strong melodic hooks. And that I think is so important because we've in many ways moved towards beat and towards rhythm and towards sampling and towards those kinds of things, but not necessarily full, rich, silky melodies that carry an emotional weight. And in the 90s, I think that those rich melodies did carry a depth that I'm not saying we don't see anymore, because we do see it, but it has been less popular. And
Right.
so now I think those melodies and those, those really deep currents of Anna Begins and the Counting Crows and of Vaseline and even of Bush, and No Doubt. And there was a lot of depth to that music and a lot of heartache, and a lot of balance between, you mentioned country. There's so many country influences in bands like Soundgarden.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, and you think about what he sang and what he did, all of these 90s rock bands, it wasn't just classic rock. It wasn't just the Beatles. It was, for me, this beautiful blend that incorporated, that incorporated country. And I see now a lot of countries incorporating more rock and roll as
Oh yeah.
well. I think it was the first time that all of these things really came together. And for me, it's wonderful to see that return, because as much as I love beats and hip hop and sampling, and brief melodies that kind of come in choruses, to see fully melodic storytelling back into songs and the celebration of things like that weren't born in the 90s, but certainly culminated, I think, at that time back on the radio and or however we get our music, Spotify. It's very cool.
So for myself, I'm from Scottsdale, Arizona. As a kid, I
Mhm.
lied to my parents and they know now, but I think I told them I had like a volleyball game or something because I wanted to go to this concert. The headliner was the Chili Peppers, then it was Nirvana, and then it was Pearl Jam. What's crazy is they only did a couple of the concerts, all three of them together. For whatever reason, I don't know if it was a routing thing or what, but they went to Phoenix and that was one of them. And I was there and I'm like, can you imagine? I mean, I saw Nirvana, I saw Pearl Jam, and then I've seen Pearl Jam since, but I've also seen Chili Peppers a million times. But just to be there and be a part of it. So I told my parents, I go, I'm sorry I lied to you, but now I'm so glad I did because I saw something like so amazing. It was like, you'll never see that again, obviously.
No, it was an incredible time. And I'm not sure if you've heard of the Bridge School benefit, which is
No.
Neil Young's benefit. He would
Okay.
bring band that kind of show to the Bay Area to benefit
Wow.
this school, the Bridge School where his son went, and similar experiences where there would be bands of that nature, if not those exact bands. And then Robin Williams was up there doing comedy and things like that. And so
Wow.
it was certainly a time where there was just every I don't know, so many wonderful bands playing together. And now when we look back at it, I guess it has become classic. It
Mhm.
was truly a classic time in music that, I think that you look at Woodstock where all of those incredible bands were born. I really think that the 90s, at some level, when we've got a little bit deeper of a lens, perhaps will be looked back on as a time similar to that, where whatever was going on in the world was giving birth to this new kind of music, this really, like I keep saying,
Isn't
very
that when Lollapalooza started, right?
yeah, it's when Lollapalooza kicked off. There
Yep.
were a lot of festivals that were born during that time. Again, like the 60s, again, where there were in
Right.
early 70s, where there all of a sudden these music festivals, because there were so many bands and there were messages that were cohesive, and anger and angst and a desire for change, and both politically, and there was fear, and there were things, pandemics like AIDS and things going on that were bringing the world together and at the same time tearing it apart. There was the birth of the internet and MySpace and Facebook and things like that, where people were suddenly more connected yet lonelier than they had ever been. There was a way to connect, not just in music, but through visual means for the first time with the birth of MTV and VH1. Suddenly we were seeing the stories of these songs playing out in front of us, and at a all day level. And so I think that the interaction with the world, both, politically and economically and socially, everything got very small very quickly. And I
Yeah.
think that really kind of happened right around the 90s.
So where can we find you and your band on socials and find out like your new music and, if you're touring and everything?
Everything's the band High Noon. So TikTok at the band High Noon. Same thing with Instagram at the band High Noon. You can find us on Spotify, again, the band High Noon, and iTunes as well, and Apple Music. We will soon also be available. I think next week our new EP drops on Friday, and it usually takes 7 to 10 days. You'll be able to make reels and all that stuff on Instagram and on TikTok with our songs. Our singles, Preacher Man and Dawn, are already out there, and we'll see the rest of the album come out. My favorite song, Wheels Down Arizona, which I wrote in I was in a rental car in Arizona in the middle of the night, and there was a huge car accident. A semi had flipped over, so they were routing all of us off of the freeway onto this dirt road, and so it was just miles of red lights. in the desert, in the White Mountains. And so I was sitting there and I
Wow.
had a notepad. And so I wrote Wheels Down Arizona. There was also for me the most upside down my life has ever been. And so that song, which is my favorite of the album, is going to be coming out. And I'm really excited about Wheels Down. I think that in many ways is kind of the most 90s storytelling song that we wrote.
That's awesome. Well, definitely looking forward to checking out more of your music and stuff. And then you said you were at a radio station. Which one? In what in
99, it's called the 99.3 The Vine
Oh,
here
cool.
locally. I know that they have streaming and they do a bunch of other things. They're part of a larger organization. So that interview, and we played Dawn live there this morning. So we just came from the radio station, and so that's a pretty cool thing that's happening, and you could probably stream it from there
Yeah.
as well. And then in terms of the winery, that's Smith Devereux. I know that that's a different topic to
No,
return
share
to,
it.
but you can find that at Smith Devereux Wines or smithdevereux.com. My name is Ian Devereux. You can find me at Ian Devereux. And so a lot of different ways to connect. And one of the things using social media that I've always prided myself on is to really take the time to sit down and connect with human beings and do so authentically. So if you reach out to the band High Noon, you'll be hearing from one of the band members, within the day. If you reach out to me in my winery, you'll hear me from the same band. I would love to host you in the vineyard out here. It's not a goal of mine to be above that level where I'm preaching down or sharing with so many people that I can't connect as an individual, because that's what I
Mhm.
get the most joy out of, is sharing my wines with people, walking them through the vineyard, sharing my music with people, our music with people, whether there be a concert where you can connect and come down in the crowd afterwards. So it is our goal to really authentically and genuinely connect with as many people as possible. So as you reach out, know that it'll be one of us, likely me, that you're talking to.
That's cool. Well, thank you for taking the time and sharing your interesting journey. It sounds like you have a lot going on for sure, and never a dull moment. So
No,
that's good.
it's cool. Yeah, I lead a full life, but I'm blessed and I'm grateful. And it's, for me, it's really important sometimes to remember that I believe everything in life is a choice. And so yes, I choose to have a full life, but it's never busy. I'm not busy because I feel like the use of the word busy implies victimhood, as
Oh,
though things are just happening to me that are suddenly busy, or I am suddenly busy. I am not. I am a adult human who gets to make a million different choices. And while I choose a full life, I also choose to spend the time to really connect with people. And I'm really grateful that you spent the time to meet me on social media and to listen to my story today, and to connect. And I hope to host you in the vineyard, and hopefully one of these days we can dance to some country music together in Nashville or something too.
absolutely. It sounds like a plan.
Cheers.